definite feeling that spring is in the air today. That's milder, I don't know, just something tangible in the air that feels quite spring-like. The snowdrops have come and gone, and I really don't think it will be that long before the bluebells make their full appearance. I've seen quite a few English bluebells around. I think generally speaking Spanish bluebells come out 2 to 3 weeks after that. Do correct me of that in the comments, but that's just experience I've had in previous years. So I thought I'd put together a little video on some top tips and handy hints on how to photograph spring flowers, make them nice and appealing. Flowers make fantastic subjects for photographers because they're just really pretty little things, reflect the light really beautifully. You have all the different shades of colour, contrast with their surroundings. Quite often find them in very pretty places as well, like down in the woodlands and heaths. Or you might find them in urban areas where their contrast of their delicate nature against the architecture or general roughness of an urban landscape might make a really interesting composition as well. So I'm down in the woodlands and we're going to look for some wildflowers. The main things that are out at the moment, as I say, snowdrops have been and gone. Got a lot of celandine out, which is really nice. I have seen some English bluebells, in particularly sunny spots. They're coming up already. Too early for the Spanish bluebells, down here anyway. And actually I imagine in the UK they'd probably come out here down in Cornwall before most other places. What else have I seen? Don't know, I have to go. Primroses. I've seen primroses out as well. So we're going to have a little look for those. We're going to use a few different techniques. One of the wonderful things about flowers, I've got to get across a really muddy puddle now. Stand by. Totally lost my train of thought. What was I talking about? Flowers? Oh yes. One of the wonderful things about flowers is you can photograph them in so many different ways. But quite often we can photograph what we think is a beautiful flower, and then when we look at our photograph we don't feel that it does it justice, that something's missing. And that's very often because we've taken a kind of snapshotty type picture, or from our normal vantage point, just looking down at the flower. So one of the key things about photographing flowers is to experiment with your position, getting down low to the flower, even beneath the flower. If you can find a little hillock in the woodland, you might actually be able to get below the flower, shooting up to it. That's particularly nice with things like bluebells, where you can look up into the flower itself. We'll also quite often find that they're in shady spots, so a little bit of lighting helps. There's some amazing photographs using artificial lighting, strobe photography, light painting. I really like natural light with flowers. So for that, I brought a reflector dish that I can bounce light around and illuminate the flowers from beneath. And then also, almost breaking some of the rules when you first learn photography, that you learn that the sun should always be over your shoulder, so it's illuminating your subject. But it's actually really good fun to shoot flowers contre jour, where the light source is behind the flower, either the sun or potentially a strobe or even a flashlight or torch behind the flower, so that you pick up all the textures within the petals coming through with the light. Sometimes if you've got a lot going on in the scene, the focus will really struggle to hit its mark, or what part of the petal or stamen you want to focus on. What I like to do then is flip the camera over into manual mode, normally on like kneeling down on my haunches, or just kneeling I suppose, and I'll put the camera into burst mode, and then I'll very slightly rock backwards and forwards, and when I'm happy that the focus is set on where I want it to be, I'll take a burst during that rock. And when you look back at your frames, this is obviously in the days before global shutters and things, you should find a frame that's really nice and tack sharp. Another thing that I do like to do, particularly with colourful flowers, is use a polariser filter, because foliage is surprisingly reflective. The greens of the leaves and the petals will reflect quite a lot of light. So by putting a polariser on, you cut out a lot of that reflection and it brings a lot of the colour back. And when you're shooting in RAW, you can bring even more kind of depth to that colour and texture out. So initially, something like a bluebell, for example, can look great on your back screen, but when you get it back into your editing suite, you realise that a lot of it's actually burnt out, and much of that will be reflection. So a polariser is really, really handy. One I absolutely love to do, and we've got some of it happening completely naturally here today, is when there's a bit of mist or dew on the flowers, on the stems and on the petals. So you've got tiny little droplets of water, beads of water. I find that to be really attractive, how it bounces the lights around. And you almost get tiny little miniature worlds. If you've got a macro lens, you can get in really close on those little droplets and it will reflect or refract, not quite sure which, the flowers themselves in tiny miniature worlds. But that bouncing of light, which at the end of the day is what photography is all about, can bring your flowers out to best effect. One of the other things that we need to think about when we're photographing flowers is getting our composition right. So it's quite tempting to launch straight in and start photographing our flowers, but we need to think about the environment around it. What is it that we might be able to exclude from the image so that it looks really nice? So that might be just picking up a few little dead twigs. We don't want to break anything, we don't want to remove anything, that's bad, leave no trace. So it needs to be natural, but can we move our camera, move our position? We'll do a bit of light gardening, as in moving dead sticks and things, in order to make it the perfect composition. Well, it started raining now, which I could see as a negative, but I'm going to see it as saving on my water spray bottle, because all the flowers will have nice little droplets on for me. Marvellous.